The stage burned forever, but we remain to play our parts.
A guilt-ridden playwright returns to the burned ruins of his theater, haunted by the ghosts of his cast, as he obsessively rewrites their final play to seek redemption. The line between art, guilt, and the afterlife blurs in a descent into madness.
The evening air hung heavy with a silence so profound it seemed to swallow even the faintest whisper. Elias Monroe stood at the threshold of the old theater, its once grand facade now a ruinous skeleton etched against the bruised sky. The building's warped arches and shattered windows bore the scars of a fire long past, yet the scent of smoke clung stubbornly to the air, a ghostly residue of that night forever imprinted on the place. His breath came shallow, clouding briefly in the chill as he hesitated, fingers trembling as they brushed the cold iron gate. The theater was no longer a place of applause and light, it was a tomb of memories, a stage suspended in a liminal space where time had fractured and bent. Yet here he was, drawn by a force he neither fully understood nor wished to resist. The ground beneath his worn boots crunched with the detritus of forgotten years, splinters of wood, shards of glass, and scattered pages yellowed with age. As Elias pushed open the heavy doors, a gust of stale air poured out, carrying with it the faintest echo of voices, laughter, and the distant strains of music. The foyer was shrouded in darkness, the remnants of once opulent decor reduced to ash and ruin. Yet amidst the desolation, the theater breathed a slow, pulsing rhythm that seemed to rise from its very foundations. Elias's eyes adjusted to the gloom, catching the faint outlines of rows of broken seats, the remnants of velvet torn and faded. Above, the proscenium arch loomed, charred but unyielding, framing the scarred stage where dreams had burned to cinders. He stepped forward, each footfall stirring motes of dust that danced like fragile specters in the thin shafts of dying light. He paused at the edge of the stage, hand trailing along the roughened wood, feeling the texture of splintered grain and the lingering heat of old flames that had consumed more than just timber. The silence pressed around him, thick and suffocating, yet beneath it lay a subtle vibration and echo of lives once lived and lost within these walls. From the shadows, a flicker of movement caught his eye, a shape, blurred and ethereal, retreating swiftly into darkness. Elias's heart clenched. He knew the theater had never been truly empty. It was a vessel for memories, for souls tethered by tragedy and unfinished business. Drawing a tattered notebook from his coat, Elias sank onto a fractured bench, the wood groaning beneath his weight. He opened the pages, ink faded but familiar, and began to write. The words flowed with a desperate intensity, as if the script itself were a living thing demanding rebirth. His voice, hoarse and low, broke the silence as he muttered lines aloud, calling to ghosts only he could see. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Figures began to coalesce at the edges of his vision, faint outlines of actors long dead, caught in an eternal performance. Their faces were pale, eyes vacant yet accusing. Elias spoke to them as if they were flesh and blood, his words laced with sorrow and guilt. The theater responded, its walls whispering secrets, its floorboards creaking beneath unseen footsteps. The night stretched endlessly, a fragile thread weaving past and present, reality and dream. Elias was caught in the relentless tide of his obsession, the play that had destroyed him now his sole purpose and torment. And as the first hints of dawn blood through the cracked ceiling, the ghosts lingered, still silent witnesses to a story that refused to end. Outside, the city stirred unaware, the ruined theater standing as a monument to loss and longing, the stage that burned forever in the heart of Elias Monroe. The theater's heavy doors groaned open into the night air, a reluctant portal to a world suspended between decay and memory. Elias Monroe stepped inside, the soles of his worn boots stirring motes of dust that danced like tiny specters in the pale glow of a single flickering bulb overhead. His fingers trembled as they brushed against the cracked surface of the grand oak desk, scarred and warped by time and neglect, a silent witness to the ruin that had become his sanctuary and prison. Tonight marked a turning point. The first full rewrite of the play, the one that had torn his life asunder, was underway. He had returned here, compelled by a force as relentless as the fire that had consumed the original production. His pen hovered over the yellowed pages, then descended with feverish urgency, scratching out lines and weaving new threads into a tapestry stained with regret and longing. The shadows around him began to stir, at first, subtle shifts in the corner of his eye, silhouettes folding into shapes, whispers woven from the breath of the past. Then, more distinctly, the ghostly figures took form. Lena, her eyes shimmering with a translucent glow, moved silently across the broken stage. Aidan, the lead, stood nearby, his ethereal countenance etched with lingering sorrow, remnants of his once vibrant presence fading into the depths of the spectral haze. Elias spoke to them as if they were flesh and blood, his voice a low murmur threading through the stillness. "You were magnificent," he said, his gaze locked on Aidan's haunted eyes. "The best I ever had, but I need it different this time. I need the truth." The ghosts responded not with words, but with silent reenactments, fragments of scenes frozen in a cruel loop. Their faces held the pain and anger of lives abruptly shattered, the echoes of screams and flames etched into their very essence. Elias's heart clenched with every movement, yet his fingers continued to scratch out notes, desperate to mend what had been broken. A sudden creak drew his attention. Clara stepped into the theater, her presence a warm contrast to the chill that clung to the ruins. Her eyes searched his face, soft but firm. "Elias, this has to stop," she pleaded, voice trembling with a mixture of love and fear. "You re-losing yourself in this place, in these ghosts. They re-not alive. You need to let them and yourself go." He turned to her, a fleeting shadow of pain crossing his features. "You don't understand," he whispered. "If I don't rewrite, if I don't find the truth in these words, they'll never rest. Neither will I." Clara reached for his hand, but he pulled away, retreating into the shadows where the ghosts danced their silent torment. The theater seemed to breathe with a life of its own, the dust swirling like embers caught in an unseen wind, carrying with it the weight of lost dreams and unspoken apologies. As the night deepened, Aidan's gaze found Elias's again, more intense, more accusing. The air thickened with unsaid words and unresolved grief. Elias felt the crushing weight of his guilt, the desperate yearning to rewrite history, to write the irreparable. Yet, in the heart of the ruin, the line between reality and hallucination blurred. Was he the playwright or the prisoner? The creator or the condemned? Each word penned was a step deeper into the labyrinth of his own making, where art and pain entwined in a dance as old as time. Clara's voice echoed once more, a fragile thread pulling at the edges of his fractured mind. But Elias was already lost to the shadows, to the ghosts, to the relentless echo of the past that refused to fade. The night stretched on, a canvas painted with sorrow and obsession. And on the ruined stage, the play began anew. The question lingered like smoke in the still air. How far would Elias go to find redemption in the ashes of his creation? The answer, like the ghosts themselves, remained just beyond reach. The theater was a cavern of shadows and whispers, its broken seats and crumbling walls swallowed by darkness, yet alive with a spectral pulse that Elias could neither deny nor fully comprehend. He stood in the center of the ruined stage, script in trembling hands, eyes fixed on the flickering apparitions that had begun their nightly ritual. They moved silently, their forms fragile and fractured like stained glass cracked and held together by some invisible thread, each ghost a shard of pain and memory. The spectral cast reenacted fragments of the play that had destroyed them, their movements jerky yet filled with a raw, aching emotion. Lena's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she mouthed silent words, her face an open book of sorrow. Harold lingered near the dim wings, a shadow among shadows, the weight of the theater's history etched into his worn expression. Elias watched, heart pounding, as the ghosts' faces flickered between anguish and longing, their secrets spilling out in broken scenes that no living soul had ever seen. These performances were not mere echoes, they were confessions. The ghosts revealed torments that had remained buried beneath the surface, unspoken fears, regrets, and betrayals intertwined with the fabric of the play. Elias' breath hitched as he recognized fragments of himself in their torment. the guilt that had shackled him since the fire, now a living, breathing entity before his eyes. The theater was no longer just a ruin. It was a crucible where pain and art fused, each spectral act a shard of Elias's fractured soul. From the darkness of the back rows, a sharp voice shattered the fragile veil of the ghostly performance. "This obsession will be your undoing, Elias." Marcus stepped forward, his dark suit a stark contrast against the faded velvet seats. His gaze was piercing, filled with bitter accusation. "You're rechasing ghosts literally and figuratively and dragging the rest of us down with you. This theater, this play, your torment, it's time to let it go." Elias's hands clenched the script tighter, knuckles whitening. "You don't understand. I have to do this. I have to fix what went wrong." "Fix?" Marcus scoffed, stepping closer. "You're tearing yourself apart. The past is dead, Elias. You're the only one who hasn't accepted it." The tension crackled like static electricity as Elias's gaze flickered to the stage once more. The ghosts had paused, their hollow eyes watching the confrontation unfold. Adon, the lead ghost, stepped forward, his pale figure more defined than ever, his haunting eyes locked onto Elias's, a silent accusation that pierced deeper than Marcus's words. Elias felt the weight of Adon's gaze settle upon him, a reminder of the friendship and trust shattered by the fire. Pain welled up, threatening to overwhelm him. The ghosts were not mere phantoms. They embodied every secret, every regret he had tried to bury. And now, they demanded reckoning. As Marcus's voice faded into the heavy silence, Elias's mind swirled with images, flames licking at the curtains, screams swallowed by smoke. The faces of his wife and Aiden etched forever in agony. The theater around him seemed to breathe, its cracked walls pulsating with the memories of that night. He was trapped between the living and the dead, the past and the present, caught in a liminal space where art and pain collided. Lena glided forward, her translucent hand reaching toward Elias, a silent plea for acknowledgement. Harold's shadow shifted, the faint creak of old floorboards echoing like a heartbeat. The ghosts were not just performers. They were witnesses and victims, their stories intertwined irrevocably with Elias's own. The night stretched on, the line between the spectral and the real blurring with each passing moment. The ghosts' fragmented scenes grew more vivid, their whispered voices threading through the dark like a mournful song. Elias's obsession spiraled further, pulling him away from Clara's faint but persistent calls from the outside world and deeper into the theater's haunted embrace. Marcus's confrontation lingered in the air like a challenge. Could Elias break free from the prison of his guilt and obsession, or would he be consumed entirely by the shadows and secrets that had risen from the ashes? As the ghosts faded with the first light of dawn, Elias remained alone on the ruined stage, the weight of his past pressing heavy against his chest. The script's blank pages whispering promises of both salvation and destruction. And somewhere beyond the shattered walls, the theater waited, patient and eternal, for the next act to begin. The theater was a cavern of shadows and whispers, its broken beams and shattered windows swallowing the faint light that filtered through the thick dust. Elias Monroe sat hunched over his battered desk, the edges stained with years of neglect and the ghost of cigarette burns. His pen scratched feverishly across the yellowing pages, each word a desperate attempt to rewrite a past that would not relent. Around him, the air was restless, a cold, palpable presence that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. From the darkness at the edge of his vision, a shape began to take form. At first, it was a shimmer, a distortion like heat rising from a summer road, but then it solidified into something far more chilling. Aidan, the lead actor, the friend lost in the fire that destroyed more than just a stage, stood before him. Pale as moonlight, his eyes glowing with a terrible light that pierced the gloom. His costume hung in tatters, remnants of a life half-lived and forever trapped in the theater's ruins. Elias did not flinch. He barely breathed. The obsession that had gripped him for so long now bound him tighter than chains. "You shouldn't be here," Elias muttered, voice rough as gravel. "You re-dead, all of you?" Aidan's gaze was steady, unyielding. "Am I?" His voice was soft but carried the weight of accusation, a sorrow that seemed to seep into the very walls. I am here because you brought me back, because you cannot let us go. The room seemed to constrict, the shadows thickening as Adon stepped closer, the faint scent of smoke and ash trailing behind him. Elias's fingers trembled, but he clung to his pen, the only anchor to the reality he still claimed. This play, Adon said, it is not a story you can rewrite to ease your conscience. You think changing the lines, altering the scenes, will bring peace, but it only drags us deeper into the fire, into the pain you refuse to face. Elias's jaw clenched, a flash of anger sparking in his haunted eyes. I have to try, for her, for you, for all of you. Trying isn't enough, Adon whispered, stepping back into the shadows, where the rest of the spectral cast began to emerge, their faces etched with silent suffering. They reenacted the final moments of that ill-fated night, the rising panic, the shattered trust, the flames licking at their dreams. The theater breathed with their pain, its timbers groaning under the weight of memory. It was a living monument to loss and regret, and Elias was caught within its grasp, a prisoner of his own making. He sank to the floor, the cold wood pressing against his hands as the ghosts circled him, their silent accusations like knives. The line between reality and the spectral performance thinned until it vanished altogether. Elias's mind fractured, shards of memory and nightmare piercing the darkness. Why won't you let us rest? Aiden's voice was a thread weaving through the chaos, a plea and a condemnation. Elias's breath hitched. Because I'm still searching for forgiveness. There is no forgiveness here, Adon replied, only the weight of obsession. And that weight will crush you if you let it. The theater pulsed with a raw energy, grief, rage, love, and despair intertwined in a dance as old as time. Elias closed his eyes, the ghost's laments wrapping around him like a shroud. Somewhere in the depths of his fractured soul, a sliver of understanding began to take root, fragile but real. But the path ahead was still shrouded in darkness, and the stage that burned forever was far from silent. As the night deepened, the ruins echoed with the sound of a pen scratching against paper, the relentless heartbeat of a man caught between creation and destruction. Elias's obsession was no longer just a torment, it was a reckoning. The heavy door groaned under its own weight as Clara pushed it open, the faint creak slicing through the oppressive silence of the ruined theater. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light that filtered through the shattered windows, casting ghostly halos around her cautious steps. Her heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination as she moved deeper into the cavernous space, each footfall echoing like a plea for Elias to hear her. There he was, a solitary figure hunched over a battered wooden table strewn with yellowed pages and ink-stained scripts. His hair was unkempt, strands clinging to his pale forehead damp with sweat. The hollow sockets beneath his eyes spoke volumes of sleepless nights and relentless torment. Yet, despite the ruin that clung to him like a second skin, those haunted eyes blazed with an intensity that both frightened and fascinated Clara. Elias, she whispered, her voice trembling yet steady. He did not look up immediately, his fingers tracing lines of text, as if seeking salvation in the ink. When his gaze finally met hers, it was like staring into a void where hope and despair wrestled endlessly. Clara, he breathed, a ghost of a smile flickering and fading. You shouldn't have come. She stepped closer, the chill of the theater biting through her thin coat. I had to. I can't stand to see you like this, trapped, unraveling. This obsession is killing you. Let me help you, please. He shook his head, voice low and cracked. It's not obsession, it's redemption. I have to fix what I broke. The play, the fire, them. Her eyes filled with tears, but her tone hardened. You can't rewrite the past, Elias. And you're not alone anymore. You have me. For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Then the sound of heavy footsteps shattered the fragile stillness. Marcus appeared at the entrance, his dark suit a stark contrast against the peeling walls and scattered debris. His face was a mask of bitter resolve. Enough, he said sharply, voice echoing with authority. This theater and this madness have to end. You sinking deeper into delusion. It's time to face reality and move on. Elias's jaw clenched, fists balled at his sides. You don't understand, this is the only way I can atone. Marcus's eyes narrowed, a tone, You re-destroying yourself and everyone around you. The world's moved on, Elias. So should you. Clara stepped between them, placing a gentle hand on Elias's arm. Let's find another way, she urged softly. But Elias pulled away, voice rising with desperate conviction. No, I must finish this. For them. For me. Marcus let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Then you were truly lost. With that, Marcus turned and strode away, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Clara looked at Elias with a mixture of sorrow and hope, reaching out once more. Don't let this be the end, she whispered. Elias's eyes drifted to the faint shimmer of spectral light gathering in the shadows, ghostly forms flickering like flames in a dying hearth. The voices of the past called to him, a siren song of pain and remembrance. He stood alone amid the ruins, torn between the tether of reality Clara offered and the consuming fire of his own obsession. The night deepened, wrapping the theater in a cloak of shadows and silence. But within Elias, a storm raged on, unyielding, relentless, and unresolved. As Clara's footsteps faded, the theater seemed to breathe, alive with the weight of memory and the fragile hope of salvation. And Elias, caught between worlds, prepared for the next act of his relentless performance. The theater loomed like a cavernous wound beneath the dim, flickering lights that hung precariously from rusted chains above the stage. Elias Monroe stood at its center, his fingers clutching the fragile, worn script as though it were a lifeline. Around him, phantoms of the past stirred, ghostly actors flickering in and out of existence, their forms fragmented, voices fractured like shards of a broken mirror. The first whispers began softly, a tremulous murmur threading through the air like a forgotten melody. Then the voices grew, overlapping in a dissonant chorus of pain and rage. Elias's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of their agony settling upon him with a suffocating force. He forced himself to breathe deeply, trying to anchor his fraying mind to the present, yet the ghost's torment seeped into the very walls, twisting the theater into a living monument of grief. From the shadowed wings emerged Lena, her spectral form barely more than a shimmer against the cracked plaster and peeling paint. Her eyes, soft and distant, held the fragile glow of a forgotten dream. She moved with a silent grace, drifting across the splintered floorboards as if searching for something lost between the echoes of time. Near the back, Harold lingered. The stagehand ghost was a shadow among shadows, his indistinct figure an enduring presence that spoke of the theater's layered history. Elias watched him with a mixture of reverence and despair, sensing in Harold's quiet endurance the weight of countless memories folded within the forgotten corners of the ruined space. Elias's pen scratched furiously across the pages, the frantic scrawl of his revisions a desperate attempt to soothe the restless spirits. Sweat beaded on his forehead, dampening the paper as he chased elusive words that might mend the fractures in the story and perhaps in himself. But with every line rewritten, the ghost's anguish only deepened. Their fragmented performances shattered the fragile narrative he tried to weave, revealing rifts not just in the play but in Elias's own psyche. Adan, the lead ghost, appeared suddenly at the edge of the stage, his pale, ethereal eyes burning with sorrow and accusation. His voice rose a raw, jagged sound that cut through the thick silence like shattered glass. The other actors joined him, their cries overlapping in a chaotic crescendo of grief, rage, and longing. The theater trembled with their collective torment, the air thick with the scent of smoke and ash, memories of fire and loss blending with the present. Elias staggered back, overwhelmed by the intensity of their pain. His hands trembled as he clutched the script, realization dawning that no amount of rewriting could fully erase the ghost's suffering or his own guilt. The fractures ran too deep, woven into the very fabric of the play and his soul, yet beneath the chaos, a fragile thread of hope persisted, faint, elusive. Lena's silent presence, Harold's steadfast vigil, the very act of repetition itself whispered of the possibility of redemption through acceptance rather than control. Elias's obsession wavered, caught between the desperate desire to fix the past and the dawning awareness of his limits. The spectral actors faded slowly as the echoes of their cries dissipated into the cold air. The theater fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the ragged breaths of a man wrestling with the weight of his own creation. Elias sank to the floorboards, the script crumpled in his grasp, and for a moment, the relentless cycle seemed poised on the brink of transformation. But the night was far from over, and the shadows still held their secrets. Elias knew that to face the ghosts and himself he would have to delve deeper into the fragments of performance and pain that haunted the stage that burned forever. As the silence stretched, a single line of dialogue echoed in his mind, fragile yet defiant, "We are not finished." The theater waited breathless for what would come next. The theater was silent save for the faint creak of the ancient wood and the distant whisper of a restless wind threading through the broken panes. Elias Monroe sat hunched at the center of the stage, his thin fingers clutching the tattered pages of his play, the ink smudged from countless rewrites. The dim glow of a lone lamp cast long shadows, flickering uneasily against the cracked walls, as if the building itself hesitated to witness what was to come. A presence stirred in the far darkness beyond the proscenium arch, a chill crawling through the air. Elias' breath caught, his eyes darting to the shifting shadows. Slowly, deliberately, a pale figure emerged, his form shimmering with an otherworldly light. Aidan, the lead ghost, stepped forward, the remnants of his stage costume hanging loosely from his spectral frame, his eyes, haunting and luminous, fixed unflinchingly on Elias. "You summoned me." Aidan's voice was a hollow echo, reverberating through the empty theater, the timbre thick with sorrow and accusation. "Why do you drag us back into this endless torment?" Elias swallowed hard, the weight of years pressing down on his chest like a vise. I had to try, to fix it. To make it right, fix it." Aidan's eyes narrowed. "By dragging the dead through the ashes of your obsession, by rewriting the pain instead of living it." The words hung heavy, each syllable a shard piercing Elias's fragile denial. He clenched the script tighter, knuckles white, as memories surged unbidden flames licking at the edges of his mind, the screams, the suffocating smoke, and the hollow ache of loss. "I never wanted this," Elias whispered, voice cracking. "I just wanted to tell the story the way it should have been told." "You wanted to tell it," Aidan said, stepping closer, "but you never wanted to hear us. To see the cost." A faint murmur rose from the rafters, a chorus of whispered laments from the spectral cast, their ethereal forms flickering like candlelight in the gloom. Elias felt their sorrow seep into his bones, an unbearable weight pressing down. "You blame me," Elias said shakily, "but you were part of it. We all were. And yet you alone write the script that traps us," Aidan replied, voice low but resolute. "You hold the pen that binds us here." A silence fell between them, thick and suffocating, as the theater seemed to pulse with the breath of old wounds. Elias's eyes darted around the empty seats, as if seeking an escape, but the shadows closed in tighter. "I can't stop," Elias confessed, the admission tearing through his defenses. "I have to keep rewriting. It's the only way I can find peace." "Peace isn't found in repetition," Aidan said softly, "but in acceptance." The words struck a chord deep within Elias, reverberating through the fractured corridors of his mind. His control, once so absolute, began to falter. The script in his hands felt heavier, the ink bleeding like fresh wounds. "You don't understand," Elias murmured, tears blurring his vision. "If I let go, all is lost." "Some things must be lost," Aidan said, stepping back into the shadows, for new beginnings to take root. As Aidan's form dissolved into the darkness, the theater breathed a long, mournful sigh. Elias was left alone on the ruined stage, the echoes of the confrontation ringing in his ears. The first cracks had appeared in the fortress of his obsession, but whether they would herald redemption or ruin remained uncertain. He glanced once more at the pages before him, the ink shimmering like blood, and for the first time, the lines between creator and creation blurred in a trembling dance of pain and possibility. Outside, the night deepened, and the theater waited, silent and watchful, for the next act to begin. The cracked planks beneath Elias's feet groaned under the weight of silence, a silence so thick it seemed to swallow the faintest whisper of sound. The air was cold, stale from years of abandonment, carrying the bitter scent of smoke and dust like a stubborn ghost clinging to memory. Elia sat stage center, the dim, fractured light of a lone